and welcome to the Love How Deep podcast with Brian and Heather Mayer. Our purpose is to equip married couples like you with resources that rely on the transformative power of God's Word to strengthen your relationship.
Welcome back to another episode of the Love How Deep podcast. And as we always say, we hope that you, as you listen, your marriage is strengthened and really as a foundation using God's Word in order to strengthen that marriage. And so today, Heather and I are going to be talking about a very common subject, right, Heather?
Yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah, it's all about conflict resolution. And I think
Yes.
disagreements, if you're in a marriage for any length of time,
They're going to
happen.
5 minutes in, you're probably going to have a disagreement.
Yes.
And that's normal.
Right.
But how do you handle that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're talking about today.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a lot of great tips and going to talk through. And I think some of these things maybe are things that maybe you haven't thought about, maybe that aren't talked about, a little bit less common
Right.
when it comes to what people think of when it comes to conflict. But I think it's still common things that happen. So,
Right.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people think conflict is bad. It's wrong because usually, I mean, let's just be real. If we're in a conflict, what are we doing? We're fighting. We're fighting. We're probably yelling at each other or something like that. And so it's like, oh gosh, conflict is bad. We can't have that. We need to eradicate all conflict within our marriage, except that conflict is going to happen because we are people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own wishes and wants. And if you think about it, conflict is bad if you don't resolve it appropriately. But if you do, it can make you stronger.
Right.
If you handle things in the right way and you don't hold grudges and just extend that true godly forgiveness, the conflict can make you so much stronger so that the next time you're faced with something, then you might handle it a little differently, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Which makes you stronger.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's healthy not to resolve it and just drop it, but I would only say if both people are okay with that. Because sometimes if one person wants to drop it, the other person wants to keep going, there's still something wrong there that needs to be maybe figured out. But
I think that's a tricky gray area because you don't want to drop it and then really, truly just bury it under the rug.
Yeah.
Because those things, that creates a very lumpy rug that you're going to trip on.
Yeah.
So you don't want to drop it and just sweep it under the rug. Like that's not, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. Is that what you meant, Brian? Just sweep it under the rug?
No, I was not meaning that. I think
you
what
meant
I was meaning.
Let it go.
Remember the disagreement over how to cook onions the other night?
Oh my gosh.
I think at some point both of us realized this is a silly thing to be arguing about. Stupid. So why don't we drop it? I think it was more of that.
Yes.
If it's something really important, and sometimes there is something important underneath the onions, so to speak, but really at that point it was like, this is silly.
Right.
And we both agreed on that. So
no point in rehashing it. Everybody said what they needed to say. It is time to move on and extend forgiveness. Right. Yeah.
There you go. And so before we get into each section, though, you were going to mention a little bit about a little acronym, HALT, and how this is when conflict tends to come up or when it's most likely to happen.
Oh, was I though?
Yeah. So
I thought you were.
Oh, okay. Well, I can do that. So
HALT. Yes. What does it mean, Brian?
So when you get into conflict, I want you, if you're listening, ask yourself this question: does it have anything to do with the word halt? And that is, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And sometimes you will find that through conflict, through disagreements, one or both of you might be feeling that way. And if you are, then that really has nothing to do with the disagreement. That means, you know what, I've got to just rest, or I've got to grab a bite to eat, or whatever. Maybe I need to go take a nap. I guess the lonely could be something that you could verbally tell your partner, hey, I'm just feeling lonely right now. Can we just sit and watch some TV and then we'll talk about this later? I don't know. But anyway, that's to kind of set us up for what we're going to talk about and just something to think about, right?
I think so.
Okay. Have I talked enough?
No, sorry. I'm kind of in and out because I'm looking at my notes while I should be communicating with you.
Right. We're supposed to be in the present moment, looking in my eyes,
moment.
gazing in my eyes.
Shame on me. Right. I am gazing in your eyes.
All right.
Okay.
Well, the first
Yeah,
part
where are we going
about
now?
conflict is what?
Understanding. And I think that's huge because in the midst of a conflict, of an argument or whatever, you feel like your spouse is not understanding you. And it can be so frustrating when you feel like you're not being heard or understood, and you start talking at each other and throwing words at each other versus really listening to each other. And so, I think it's important to think about how you could create understanding during conflict. Something really important to do is to make sure that you're actively listening to your spouse, that you're not thinking about your wishes, your wants, your desires, those selfish kind of behaviors, but you're really, really focusing on what the other person is saying, to the point of being able to kind of repeat back in your own words what they said. I feel like that helps understanding each other along quite a ways, because if Brian and I are doing that, if I say something to him and he sort of repeats back in his own words what I've said, then that tells me, oh, he gets it. He understands what I'm saying. Okay, this is going better than I thought. Or I can say, let me rephrase that. That's not what I meant. What I meant was this, and then I can restate it. And I think those couple of little things just help you understand each other, and help you know that you're being heard in that situation. I think that helps. Yeah, that just helps you a long ways if you practice that sort of active listening. Something that lets your partner know that you understand him, that you're listening to him, is you're not on your phone. You are not in the middle of cooking or cleaning or wandering around the house picking things up, like whatever. But if you stand there and you give each other that eye contact, I think that will let your spouse know he or she is listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a couple things in there as you were talking that I was thinking about. The first part, when you talked about how do you know your partner's not taking a disagreement seriously? Well, I know one thing that I'm still working on at this age is sometimes I have a tendency to want to be silly, to add humor, sometimes to be a little sarcastic. You're trying to be serious.
Yeah.
And that comes from my childhood. I like to be funny. I like to make people laugh. And of course, there's a time and a place for that. But sometimes I would try to do that when my mom was trying to scold me or punish me or whatever. And then that just made it worse. And she got angrier. And I know that's pretty much the way it works for anybody, including you.
Right.
And so I'm trying to work on that. And then the other thing.
So let me ask you this. Okay, so this does happen to us every once in a while, where I'm trying to have a serious conversation about something. And so, Brian, when you do kind of come in with the jokey humor and you want to be goofy and silly, I don't feel like I'm being heard or taken seriously. And that's kind of hurtful. So what could you, I don't know, what could you do so that rather than be a jokey, silly person in that moment? Because I know for me, when it happens, I tend to get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And I say things like, hey, can you just stop? I'm being serious here.
Mm-hmm.
Not the best way to say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to watch my tone and say, let me just say this again. Can you look at me in all seriousness? I think that might be a better way to say it. Yeah. It's a knee-jerk reaction that I have.
Right.
And I'm going to work on that.
Okay, yeah. So if we both, I guess.
Yeah, what could
me,
you do?
It's just as simple as not being that way, and
what if you see me get upset in the midst of that?
Just genuinely apologize.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was being silly. It is kind of a knee-jerk reaction for me.
Yeah.
And I think you and I both, we've talked a little bit about the Enneagram on this podcast, and we're both peacemakers. That's like pretty high for me. I'm not completely a peacemaker, but it's high. And so I think both of us want to do things to kind of keep the temperature down, but a lot of times, like the humor, the silliness, the sarcasm, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, that's going to cool things down. And, it does the opposite.
Yeah.
So the other thing I was going to mention with what you said how, about creating understanding. Another thing I'm going to work on that I tend to do, I still do it. I think I even did it this morning, is I tend to walk away from you Like say I've got some laundry in my hands and you're trying to tell me a story or something important. Instead of saying, can you pause that? Which I do that sometimes. Instead of saying, can you pause that? Let me put this away. I'll come right back.
Right.
Instead, I just like slowly drift away and you're like, where'd he go?
Am I talking to the cat? Okay, I'm talking to the cat.
Right.
Sometimes that happens too. Yeah.
So we've got some things to work on, don't we?
Yeah. Okay. And I think it's just important to kind of reiterate that the way that you communicate with each other has a lot to do with your conflict resolution, your ability to resolve these things when they're happening. Mm-hmm. So you want to, I guess, learn new patterns, new habits when you are in the middle of conflict.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our second area that we want to talk about. It's all about some conflict resolution strategies, which really, I think a lot of what we're talking about is our strategies, but this specific one, I think, is a good one to talk about. And it revolves around what can you do to resolve a conflict rather than avoid it. And I've got lots of different thoughts on that. I'm sure, Heather, you probably do too. But one of those things is, we talk about the talking spoon a lot on this podcast. Yes. That if you want to confront something and it gets a little heated, you can use a spoon and you pass it back and forth between each other and you say what you need to say and then you repeat back what you're hearing. And the spoon seems to serve as some sort of visual reminder that, hey, we need to keep the temperature down. We need to be careful about what we're saying here.
I think it's another great idea, another great thing to do is something that you've done with me, and that's sit down and face each other and hold hands in the middle of a conflict. There's something about that that's uncomfortable, but it also like breaks that that stairway of anger that escalates inside of you because you're holding hands with each other. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. So that is a strategy to maybe to have better communication in the middle of your conflict, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's, I urge you all to try that.
Yeah. And we were working with a couple last night and we mentor through our church and we do couple to couple. And we were talking about conflict actually last night. And they had mentioned, I don't know where they had heard this or saw this, but they said somebody had told them when you're in conflict, put on birthday hats, I think, with the little rubber bands. And then now you try to talk about the thing that you're disagreeing upon. And
the other one looks silly. The other person,
And almost assuredly, you're probably going to laugh a little bit, have a little bit of fun with it, and maybe get through the discussion a little bit easier. I had this thought about, wearing a beard or I don't even know, putting on a silly costume. That's probably a little too much, but because when you're in a heated argument, you're not going to say, hold on a second, let me go grab my Halloween costume.
This is my fighting costume.
But it's a little something just to break it up. I would say some other strategies you can use to resolve conflict are, again, maybe it's just you agree to disagree and, try to do that without resentment, without bitterness, because that can be a little tough. Sometimes one of you says, well, we just need to agree to disagree. And then, when you're saying it that way.
And that's true because sometimes you're not going to, there's not a right or a wrong. You're both right in your
right in your perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think I like the idea of writing it down, like writing down what the problem is. Then the problem is on paper.
Yeah.
And you can also write down possible solutions. Regardless of how goofy they might be or serious they might be, but just write them down. It helps you. It helps you focus your thoughts of
takes the emotion out of it.
Yes,
you focus your thoughts. The paper becomes the bad guy.
Yes,
right. Yeah,
yes.
All good things. You could even, if it's as silly as like you're not sure where to eat out tonight and one of you has one idea, the other has another. All right, we'll do your idea this time, but next week, can we do my idea?
I like that a lot because sometimes it's, one of you might just always be kind of the one that kind of gives in. Like, I want to go to, this hamburger place. Well, I'd rather go to this Mexican place. Okay, fine. And then that can leave that they always win kind of thoughts in your head, which is not healthy either because that can also build up into little bits of resentment. So I really like the idea of taking turns of where you're going to eat, what you're having for dinner that night, or whatever, but really just kind of sharing that load of decision making. And occasionally you might even both want to go to the same place and be okay with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, one thing that I think is if you come up with a good way, something that you feel is a good way to solve a disagreement, you want to watch how you say it. I know we say that on here all the time. You have to watch how you say it. So you don't want to come in like a bull in a china shop and say, this is what we're going to do. End of story. That's not going to go over well at all. But if you said, I feel it's really important that we try XYZ. And the reason I feel that way is because blah, blah, blah. So I hope that you kind of picked up as I really slowed down there that I started that with an I statement. I feel, not this is what we're doing, not you are wrong, none of those attacking sort of defensive ways of saying it, but it's all about me. It's all about I feel. But I didn't stop there. I went in to explain why I felt that way. When I would teach opinion writing with my students, I would always start out with, what is your favorite color? I like pink. Okay. Why is pink your favorite color? Well, bubblegum is pink and I like bubblegum. Pink is a very girly color. The fairy princesses wear pink. And like whatever it is, when you're looking at a first grader, second grader, and they're writing about their favorite color, you're going to accept whatever they say because they're giving you a valid response that backs up their feelings. And so, all that to say, if you come up with a great idea, start with that I feel statement and then back it up with the reason why you feel that way, why you feel like it might be good.
Mm-hmm.
And don't stop there. Make sure you listen to your spouse when they have maybe a different idea, not necessarily better, but a different idea. Or if they say, yes, but what about, you want to continue to have a discussion that's in a healthy way.
That's good. Yeah. And then we want to talk a little bit about what would you do if you're having difficulty resolving a disagreement? Would you seek help? And I think the answer would be, yes. I would say yes. Please do that. If you're finding that the disagreements are mounting up and it's creating a lot of animosity and just ill feelings toward each other, that's when you know that there's an issue. And I mention him all the time on the podcast, John Gottman, famous couples researcher. He says that couples unfortunately wait about 6 years after problems start. And I hate that because that's a long time to wait when things are really bad.
A lot of buildup.
It's gonna take a long time to kind of untangle that. And so, if you're listening and that's where you are, you are where you are, and I wouldn't worry about that. I would still seek help, but just know that depending on how long this has gone on and how hard it's been, it could take a while to untangle this. So, but you could do, and Heather, you can help me with this, but professional counseling.
Yeah.
Marriage mentoring, that's what we do through our church. You may have at your church, you may have resources there. The pastor could be a good resource.
Could you even go to your parents if you're in agreement that you both want to go to your parents and say, hey, can you kind of help us with this? We're sort of struggling here. Or
as long as they'd be neutral and not
as long as your
with
parents
one or the
be
other.
Neutral. Yes, that's the important thing. You've got to have a neutral party. Maybe you've got some friends of yours that are just very dear confidants. They know kind of you inside and out, and maybe they could be a neutral party to say, hey, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And that's a hard thing to do because you don't want to ruin friendships or anything like that. But if you have someone close enough to you that you feel like you could bounce some ideas off together. I'm not saying the husband goes and talks to his friends and the wife talks to her friends and then they're all bad-mouthing each other. Sorry, that's not what I mean by all of that. But I mean, if you have some trusted friends that could maybe mentor you through a little bit of a rough patch, I think it's worth exploring.
Yeah. And then if it's a little bit on the lighter side, you could always try a weekend retreat or some kind of a getaway or some kind of course, on relationships. But I would say getting in front of another human being it can be very important. It can be very valuable. And with that, we're going to move on to the next section, and we're going to talk a little bit about self-awareness, right? And the things that kind of happen, I think, inside of us is how we're going to kick this one off.
Right. Who's kicking this off?
I think you are.
Am
right?
I kicking this off?
Sure.
Okay.
Why not? We'd like to do this on the fly.
Well planned. I know. Okay. So let's say that you've resolved a conflict, whether it's big or small, and one of you feels like the winner and the other one feels like the loser. Well, that is not the end goal. The end goal is to resolve the conflict in a healthy way. Why? To build a stronger marriage. So we don't have a winner and a loser. We've got to kind of get that out of our brain that somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. Because maybe it does sort of play out that way to where, like Brian, if your idea is the one that we're going to go with, it is not fair for me to sit over here and feel like the victim and to feel like I always lose and he always wins. He always gets his way. We never do it my way. I'm not going to support him in this. I mean, I might tell him, fine, whatever, we'll do it your way. Yeah, those words came out of my mouth, but did I sound very supportive? I'm going to go with no on that one. So I want to watch that attitude that I have. I want to be self-aware and humble too, to say, yeah, I can have a good supportive attitude. I can say, all right, Brian, we're going to do it your way. What can I do to help? How can I help make this work? How can we be successful with this decision that we've made? And Brian, if you're sitting over there as the quote unquote winner, we're going with your idea, you have to be self-aware of your attitude of like, yes, I win. Even if you don't do that on the outside, you don't want to do that on the inside because that's just a haughty spirit. And the Bible talks about that pride cometh before the fall. So you're going down. But I mean, you have to watch that and understand that marriage is a team effort and it takes both of you working together. And so if you come to an agreement, you're in agreement together, the both of you. And so you're going to go all in and you're going to give that a try, whatever that agreement was, and see if it works because you're working at it together. And if it doesn't, go back to the other person's idea and say, all right, why don't we try it your way this time? I think that's just that give and take that we have. And, so that you're preventing like this shutting down in your marriage. You are working together as a team. I think that it's just really important to be aware of the way that we respond in our marriage.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say about what you were talking about earlier there, with the winning and losing. There's times where I might, we kind of bang heads a little bit, and then finally I just say, okay, fine, we'll do that. And then, the way I say it again is kind of like, well, I'm the victim. And then what I would encourage you not to do, which is, I think that this is a strength of ours, is that we don't usually sulk very long. Like, yes, I will admit it happens for a few minutes, but usually I sort of ask myself this question. I'm like, if you're going to sulk, you either need to drop your attitude or you need to say something. You can't just silently walk around, and be passive aggressive and upset. And I think that's something that you and I are pretty good at.
Right.
We might in the moment just kind of be a little upset, maybe shut down for a few minutes, but then I think we can usually kind of snap out of it. But we've worked with lots of couples where they'll tell us things like, oh, we haven't talked for 2 days or 3 days.
Right.
And
that's not a healthy place to be.
That is not good.
No,
don't do that. Like I said, if you're going to sulk, you either need to work on dropping it or you need to talk about it.
Right.
So yeah. So you talked a little bit about winning and losing, and where are we moving to next? Are we going down to the impact of conflict on the relationship? All right, well, let's do that.
I think so.
All right. So, yeah. So a couple things there. The first thing we're going to talk about is, when you say nothing, there are times where that is a good thing, but there are times when that is not a good thing.
Yeah, I think that comes down to, why are you saying nothing? Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think, and obviously it's healthy when you realize, you know what, if I say something, it's just going to escalate and it's just not going to be good, or it's going to be something, you know, I want to get a little dig, or I want to be nasty, or, you know, in those cases, it's good not to say anything.
Right.
But, you know, it's not healthy when you want to be assertive and you want to say just how you feel, you know, or maybe that something's upsetting you or whatever it might be, or just to be able to provide your opinion in a kind and loving manner. If you're being silent on those types of things, then that's obviously not a good thing, and that's not healthy. And then obviously that's the short term of it. When you're in a conflict, when you're in a discussion, when there's upset, there's the short term of it, but then there's also the long term, and there's a price for silence, you know, long term. Right. You know, I think I just mentioned it, you know, sometimes we'll have couples tell us, oh, I didn't speak for 3 days. And it's like, that's not good for your relationship. I don't really care kind of what's going on and how good things are. I mean, obviously if you're in an abusive situation, then we'll of course get to safety, but I don't think we're talking about that here. But, you know, just being silent and walking around and being passive aggressive for 2 or 3 days or a week or whatever, that's just it's not healthy. You know, talk about it. And if you need the talking spoon or whatever, or to put on your birthday hats, put on your big boy pants, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's about all I wanted to say. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to sum this up just a little bit, that for good conflict resolution to happen, we need to watch our body language, and you know, and just give your spouse your full attention when you are talking to each other. And the active listening that we've talked about a number of times. Pick some strategies that you think might work for you, like writing it down or seeking some help if you need to. Just brainstorming with each other. And then be aware of your response when you do come to an agreement, and take that winning losing bit out of it, but be aware of your response. Come together as a team, you and your spouse and Jesus. That's the 3-stranded cord that is not easily broken. And that is your goal right there. And then understand that the conflict can have an impact on your relationship in a negative way, and also in a positive way, as I spoke about in the beginning, that it can be healthy because it makes you stronger and it teaches you more about your spouse and more about yourself and more about the ways that you communicate in the middle of a conflict. So yeah, just want to kind of reiterate those things and
good stuff.
Yeah, and leave you with something that we have on the website. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you've probably heard us talk about the 10 practical communication strategies. Good conflict resolution always needs good practical communication. You have to be able to talk with each other in a good way. So we encourage you to go to the website and download this bit for there's no cost for it, but print it off, try it out, do it, and see if that helps you in the midst of a conflict to connect with each other and have a more effective conversation.
Yeah, and there's a link for that in the show notes. It'll be on the show notes at lovehowdeep.com/35 is the number of our episode today.
Awesome. Well, we just thank you all so much for tuning in. We appreciate you giving your time to listen to this and hope that you're sharing it with others. And stay tuned for our next episode.